Canada is marking the 4th annual National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, a time to remember Indigenous children who died at residential schools and to commemorate survivors and their families.
I've had the privilege of sitting on the Survivors Circle for the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. And as a member, I hope to ensure that our stories are relevant and informative so that history will never be repeated again.
Also known as Orange Shirt Day, events are being held across the country. People gathered to remember the more than 150,000 First Nation, Métis, and Inuit children who were forced to attend church-run, government-funded residential schools between the 1870s and 1997. The National Center for Truth and Reconciliation estimates that more than 4,100 children died while attending the schools. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is taking part in events in the Northwest Territories. Trudeau announced a 10-year agreement worth over $500 million in support of the Inuit-led Child and Family Services. He says the goal is to ensure that children are protected in their communities and not sent elsewhere. The Prime Minister also spoke of the significance of this day, calling it a time to recognize the past and to look to the future.
And on this day of truth and reconciliation, we have to reflect on that past, understand that it's not just past, that survivors of residential schools are still among us, and that kids and grandkids are still impacted by their parents, their grandparents being in residential schools. It's not just about the past, it's about the present. It's about understanding that what we have to do as a country, everyone, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, is learn to respect and celebrate Indigenous cultures, language, stories, and learn to truly partner in protecting this land and building a future for everyone.
The main gathering for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation was held this afternoon on Parliament Hill. As Olivia Stefanovic reports, it was a day of both reflection and emotion.
In the shadow of the buildings where Canada's residential school policy was created and enforced, a nation came to remember. Honoring the thousands of children who never returned from the institutions they were forced to attend.
There's no forgiving, not for me.
Though the pain raw, survivors shared their stories.
According to them, we were dirty Indians. They cut our hair. They throw us in the bathtub because wash the Indianness out of us, scrubbing us. It didn't work.
Spoken in languages forbidden from residential schools.
Every child matters.
We honor the resilience of survivors who continue to bravely share their stories so that we may learn. In their stories, there is unspeakable pain, but there is also tremendous courage and determination to emerge into healing and light.
The Prime Minister marked the day by speaking to youth in Inuvik, Northwest Territories.
Let's all understand that the true journey of reconciliation will take decades.
But there are calls for the federal government to do more.
I think what people need to understand is the price we paid as children.
Survivors are demanding increased stable resources to search for possible graves.
Why should we have to beg money from the very entities that conducted this atrocity?
As a government, we've been with survivors from day one.
The Crown Indigenous Relations Minister says the government is responding to survivors' concerns by restoring funding for investigations.
John was killed in residential school. There was never really any investigation because this kind of still remains a mystery.
But for survivors and their families, there's still a long journey to healing.
We don't really know how many of these children died.
And the full truth of this history still felt today. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
Toronto, a new Indigenous spirit garden opened today outside City Hall. The centerpiece is a limestone carving of a snapping turtle sitting in the middle of a reflection pool and a wall displaying the names of all 18 residential schools that operated in Ontario. Other elements include a teaching lodge, a canoe, and a granite inukshuk. The artist who made the turtle explains the animal's significance.
Strength and sort of direction. Because when I look at it, I see them in the nature, and I feel like they always know where they're going. So when I see them, like in my own community of Nawash, I see them on the road, or I'll see them on the side of the road. They always are just trudging along, but they have direction.
Rose LeMay joins me now. She's the CEO of the Indigenous Reconciliation Group, an Indigenous-owned company that supports the relationship between Canadians and Indigenous peoples. We reached her in Ottawa. Rose, lovely to see you again.
Good evening, Angie.
You and I have had so many conversations around this day, but so many conversations over the course of the years when we've talked about truth and reconciliation and what it means. We're now here on the fourth official day as it is marked across the country. Talk to me about what you're feeling today.
Angie, I am feeling much more hope than I have in the past year to see the hundreds of people who came out to Parliament Hill today. And that was not the only event in Ottawa. There were numerous events. To see the orange shirts on all the different streets, to see Canadians coming out. This was a bit of a shift for this country. It has become normalized to talk about reconciliation, and I think that is a big shift for this country. Unfortunately, the shift probably only became because of Kamloops and the announcement of the 215 and the ongoing search for children who did not come home. Unfortunately, we needed those children's voices to pressure us to do something more. But here we are, and what a shift even from last year.
Indeed, as you say that we've talked about the laying the stones in this path, and that path seems to have moved even further. In talking to so many people, a bit of the narrative has also been about what the purpose of this day needs to be is that moving forward, remembering and honoring and never forgetting the past, but now forging new relationships. Your thoughts?
For sure. As we continue to build the sense of importance on this day, I'd also like to think of it as a signpost. While we have this one day on September 30th, we cannot stop after this day is over. The changes that need to occur in this country in order to bring reconciliation about, that's a year-long endeavor, and many of us need to be involved in that. Otherwise, we will take forever to do reconciliation. And we don't have that time. There is an urgency to do it fairly quickly, only because the risks Indigenous peoples face of racism in healthcare or a fear of interacting with police, as we've seen in this country in the past month. These are things that deserve urgent action, not a slow action. They deserve urgency.
And when we talk about that urgency, again, you and I have had many conversations with regards to the 94 recommendations for the federal government to move forward on. We're inching, Rose, and it could take decades for all of those 94 recommendations to be met. Does that concern you at all?
It is greatly concerning, but I hope it is just not me that is greatly concerned. Of the 94 calls to action, the Yellowhead Institute reported at the end of 2023 that some 81, I think, have not been actioned. Nothing has happened. This is not something that we can go slowly at. The level of risk for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is high that we should not be slow walking this. This should not take generations. We don't have generations to waste. And it really is something that we need to finish within a generation, or we might not finish it. We need that level of urgency put on the governments, both federal, provincial, and territorial, in order to speed it up in a good way, not too fast, but certainly not too slow.
You mentioned Orange Shirt Day, and we know that that really was also the springboard to a lot of that recognition. There's concern that that's being a little bit lost here.
I am hearing a bit of concern. I'm not sure about that. Everything that I saw in the city of Ottawa, which I live, was incredibly respectful of survivors, of those who we've lost, of children who did not come home. I didn't hear that from people I spoke to, but this is only my experience.
I think Phyllis Webstad was of course, the creator, the founder of Orange Shirt Day, expressing a little bit of that, saying perhaps more acknowledgement needed to be there. But to your point, seeing the sea of orange shirts that we've seen, I think, in events right across the country, even just people in general wearing those orange shirts really does speak volumes. Rose, before I let you go, we've always talked about sort of where the government needs to be stepping forward. We've talked about this, we know, is a federal holiday. The Trudeau government announcing that 10-year agreement just today, over $500 million in support of Inuit-led children and family services. I've always asked you the question, what more does the government need to do? This act now, hearing about this, and we know that there's been that fight for funding consistently. How are you feeling about this?
There's a couple of things that I see as priorities, and simply from my experience, I'm sure others have other priorities as well. The first is set to bring the RCMP to account, to bring them to the table of reconciliation. If there ever was distance, here it is between RCMP and reconciliation. We lost 6 Indigenous people at the hands of different police forces in 2 weeks in this country. That should be an emergency, but we don't have that sense of emergency. Police forces across this country work for us, and yet we can't demand a change. It seems that our voices are unheard. This is the one place I'd say the federal government needs to act quickly. The second is to give over all the records. They might still hold records from residential schools, including St. Anne's, and to continue to pressure churches, the Catholic Church, to give over records. We still have not received the records around lost kids in Catholic Church-run schools. If you are connected to the Catholic Church, anybody, this is a time to make your voice heard. We need the voices of allies to push for these things to shift.
2 extremely important points, issues that there continue to be calls for both. Rose, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me your time today. Rose LeMay is the CEO of the Indigenous Reconciliation Group. Rose, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
And of course, we know this is a very important day. It can also be an extremely tough one for many people. There is support for those who need it. The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available. It can be reached 24 hours a day. Here is the number, 1-866-925-4419. And today isn't the only National Day for Canadians to observe and learn about Indigenous traditions and cultures. We also mark Ribbon Skirt Day every year on January 4th. Well, we will be doing that. Isabella Kulak is the reason, of course, we do that. She joins us today from Kamsack, Saskatchewan, alongside her mother, Lana, and her dad, Chris, also joins us from Saskatoon. Isabella, Lana, Chris, so good to see all of you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Canada Tonight.
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. Isabella, you look lovely as always. And I know you've been feeling a bit under the weather, so thank you so much for coming on to the show. But talk to me, remind our viewers, if you can, a little bit about what your story is. You've become this incredible voice for the next generation. So if you can, in brief, talk to us about your ribbon skirt and how all of this happened.
Well, it all started when I went to school wearing my ribbon skirt for a formal day at my school. And me and my sister wanted to match, so we both wore our favorite ribbon skirts. And then when I got to school, it was all normal until around lunch. It took a turn for the worst when an educational assistant working in my class made an unexpected and rude comment on what I was wearing and said that what I was wearing did not match and was not considered formal, and suggested me to wear a dress next time and compared me to another student. That comment made me feel very upset inside and sad, and all I wanted to do in that moment was just take my skirt off. But when I got home that evening, my mom automatically knew something was wrong, and I opened up to her. And she told my auntie, and then the next day I woke up and I was all over internet, and it was just very overwhelming.
I can imagine that it was, but you certainly sparked a huge conversation with so many people now coming to support you. And I know from there it went from you not only just being able to proudly wear your ribbon skirt, which I know you absolutely love and adore, and it's so representative of who you are as a young woman, as a young girl, now 14. But then it developed into this narrative of doing more. And the school had a ribbon skirt day to now January 4th is National Ribbon Skirt Day. What does that mean for you? Because we've celebrated it now for the first time this year and will continue to do so. Isabella.
Well, being the one who started National Ribbon Skirt Day and knowing that I've made a lasting impact on a lot of people's lives, it makes me feel absolutely amazing inside and just gives me a feeling that I'm capable of anything and everything. And it also means a lot to me because I've always dreamed of one day being able to help people in some way. And now people from all backgrounds and cultures can showcase their culture with pride and happiness. And for many, this day is used to celebrate the beauty and the significance behind the ribbon skirt, which represents to me strength, resilience, cultural identity, and the rich heritage of Indigenous women.
Indeed. And Lana, I'm looking at you and I'm just, every time you and I have a conversation, the smile on your face just gets bigger and bigger when you're listening to Isabella talk. And Chris, I want to bring you in as well. But Lana, first, hearing your daughter now at 14, this all happened when she was just 10 years old. How are you feeling? She's this incredible voice. She's this incredible vision for youth.
Well, it just amazes me more and more as every day passes from when she was 10, so quiet and soft-spoken, to this 14-year-old young lady that's finding her voice and finding so much power deep within herself and moving mountains and going almost from coast to coast to speaking in front of large groups and doing presentations at universities. And she has so much happening for her right now and so many more things to come. And it just warms my heart and I'm so proud of her.
Oh my God, I'm beaming too. I'm so proud of her as well. As we've watched her do what she can do. Chris, give me your thoughts. We've had a lot of conversations and I know the smile on your face just gets wider and wider. But as we talk to you about what Isabella has been able to do, and of course on this day of Orange Shirt Day and National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, what's going through your mind?
At the University of Saskatchewan, re-educating late in my life, and I can see moves in the right direction with the treaty land acknowledgements and the syllabus of each of my classes at Edwards. I see a more diverse student group being enrolled in university, and so just my firsthand experiences, even the visibility of orange shirts today when I was going through Costco. And the ribbon skirts out and worn with pride around the city. I never used to see that amount of representation. And I think that in some way, Bella's activism and our family's stance on these things has brought both non-Indigenous and Indigenous people together to really recognize the significance of what it means and the conversations that need to happen at a national level.
Isabella, what does this day mean for you you're proudly wearing your ribbon skirt. You've got your ribbon skirt. Your mom and dad have talked about how you've now speaking to so many people. You're another person that young people can look towards. So as you mark this day, what does it mean for you?
Well, for me, it has always reminded me of my grandma Stella, because she taught me everything that I know today about my culture. And she is one of the people who made me who I am. And I know for a lot of people, January 4th serves as a reminder for the importance and recognition and cultural diversity of the need to honor and preserve Indigenous practices. And it also encourages everybody to learn about and appreciate the stories and meanings behind the ribbon skirt.
Indeed. And before I let you both, all three of you go, we've also talked about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the 94 recommendations. Chris and Lana, as you see what your daughter's been able to do, Chris, as you point out, being able to see more orange shirts and more of that narrative, are you feeling hopeful on this path forward now?
I'm feeling hopeful, but calls to action should be regarded as calls to action. And I heard for the people of Neskantaga First Nation in Ontario who've been under a boil water advisory for 29 years. They have a limit of 4 liters per person per week. I think it's a national shame, and I would encourage the federal government and the provincial government to act on water issues with First Nations, as well as culturally appropriate healthcare, access to healthcare, and ultimately policing strategies that are inclusive and respectful of Indigenous people.
Indeed. Lana, I've got a few seconds left. A quick word from you.
Well, personally, this day just gives me some time to reflect and honor my late mother, Stella Pelly, that she was a residential school survivor. And I'm here today because she survived. And during her time, she encouraged me and my sisters just to be proud of who we are and to be kind to everybody. And at the same time, protect our hearts and don't let anybody change us.
Well, we are so proud and honored to have the three of you here with us on Canada Tonight and being able to talk to us. And Isabella, wow, it's been an incredible 4 years, and I'm so happy that we got a chance to talk to you again. You can do anything, absolutely, that you want. Lana, Chris Kulak, Isabella Kulak, thank you, all three of you, so much for talking to me today.
Thank you so much for having us on.
You're very welcome.